you have to test people's basically tolerance, their patience, and basically whether they're mentally retarded to tell people in this country that they won the elections. Any person who believes that in the face of all the evidence, in the face of the entire international community saying otherwise, in the face of the fact that the SOPs that Lowenfield had and that the PPP had and everyone had showed that the PPP won, but their SOPs never surfaced so far. They can't be made public because Harman is sitting on them like in a nest waiting for them to hatch little eggs, can't get them out before time or else they would spoil, like when you sit on eggs. So that's where the SOPs are. So any person, they're doing documentaries, etc., that would believe that they won the election has to be delusional or mentally retarded. Mentally retarded, because it means they can't think for themselves, they can't read and understand. They're not curious. They listen to stupidity.
Dr. Jagdeo.
Welcome to Politics 101. As they say, the morning after the big rally in Linden, the demonstration at the Square of the Revolution, and of course, as we would say in the communities, aha, you get catch. You get catch. When a few months ago, a month this year, in making an analysis of the relationship between political party and their followers, and she alluded to the fact that some followers follow their leaders without asking questions. The entire half of the political divide came down on her and said she made the most racist statement of the century. And some of us said, wait a minute. Wait a minute. That's not what she was saying. She was making an analysis of the relationship between leaders and followers in a sharply divided society. And they didn't stop until some of us stepped in and said, stop it. You are not going to lynch a Black woman in Guyana and get away with it. That's the only way they stopped. And here we are. Somebody called me and said, Dr. Hines, Mr. Jagdeo is saying that you are telling people not to take the vaccine. I normally don't pay attention to Mr. Jagdeo rantings, but I felt that I had to. And so I went and I heard Mr. Jagdeo lying on me, and I got past that very quickly because that was and is easy to deal with. But then I heard the man saying that those people who believe that a coalition won the election, they are mentally retarded and delusional. And I said, but wait a minute. I know that most of the coalition supporters believe that the coalition won the election, or at worst, they believe that the PPP did not win the election. So this man cannot be making a by the way statement. This man here is making an accusation against half of the population of Guyana. And so I decided to bring it to light. Mr. Jagdeo is saying that half of our electorate is mentally retarded and delusional. And it can't be a by the way statement because it was said by Mr. Jagdeo, who is the de facto president of Guyana, is the leader of one of the two major political parties in Guyana. He's the person that is in charge of the economy of Guyana. And so Mr. Jagdeo has power at his disposal. If Mr. Jagdeo shows a bias against half of the population as an individual, one may say, well, he's biased, he's prejudiced, but he's an individual who has power. I mentioned to you the power demand disposal. He's formerly vice president. He's a de facto head of the government and head of state. De facto means as if. He may not be de jure by law, but in practice he is. And he's the leader of one of the two major political parties. He is in charge of the economy. And so therefore, his prejudices and his biases, all that power at his disposal, he's in a position to turn his prejudices and his biases into policy. And we have already demonstrated to the world that the government of the day has been acting in an ethnically and politically biased manner as far as the distribution of resources are concerned, as far as its mandates to the population are concerned, as far as the policy, as far as the areas in which it is emphasizing its economic policies are concerned. And so here is the man who's the architect of those policies saying that half the population are mentally retarded. Not David Hines say that. Not Lincoln Lewis say that. Not Kidaki Hampson and not Eric Phillips say that Jagdeo say. Jagdeo said it. And you have heard it. Tonight, we are going to be talking about the meaning and the implications of that statement by Mr. Jagdeo. I don't call people racist easily. Because when you call people racist, you're ready to give up on them. There's no conversation to be had with a racist. So when I make the charge of racism, I am convinced that that person is guilty or almost guilty. The guests tonight are no strangers to you, no strangers. And they are in a position because they have been paying attention. The man who coined the term in Guyana, economic genocide against an ethnic group, is Lincoln Lewis. He said a long time ago, and he's been beating that drum for the rest of us to hear. The man who said they're pumping oil, but nobody is feeling the effects of the pumping of the oil. I love that one. All right. Certainly not people who are mentally retarded, according to that. Jared Duncan. And he's in the ring every night fighting tooth and nail for the Guyanese people. In particular, those of us who are shut out of power, but ultimately for the Guyanese people. And the Bostonian Morning Time, the Bostonian in Aki, Amsterdam, one of the new recruits to the higher form of struggle in Guyana. And when I say recruit, he's been recruited by the people of Guyana to be their leader, one of their leaders. They are all in the house tonight. Politics 101. Let's start to rock and roll. Gentlemen, welcome
Thank you,
A
Dr.
very good
Hines.
evening.
Thank you, viewers. Good evening.
A very
Sharon,
good evening, Dr. Hines.
thank you, my
That
brother.
we,
Thank you, David. Thank you. Thank
Thank you.
the viewers. Thank you,
Sharon,
David, for
Louis.
inviting me.
right. Sharon, you caught me a number of times to come on to your program, and I never caught you, but it was a sharp edge, and I was at first slip, and I caught it. So you're here tonight. You got to go because you got to rock and roll in the ring earlier. So I'm going to allow you to monopolize the first half hour of this program with the permission of the two other guests. Are you surprised that this man made that statement after all the big hue and cry when they thought Amanza was saying that they were mentally lazy?
Dr. Hines, I'm not surprised at all. In a sense, we have seen this movie before because I remember, I think I was much younger when I think it was Dr. Jagan who had said that the black people in this country are the lower rungs of the social ladder. That is not much dissimilar from this. But Mr. Jagdeo is no Chedi Jagan by any stretch of the imagination. I think you have a better kind of understanding and you can unpack this much more eloquently than I can. But when I see this and when I hear what Mr. Jagdeo has said, it seems to me that he wants to be a distraction. It seems to me he wants to distract from their retarded policies because they had promised, Dr. Hines, economic dynamism 2 budgets ago. They had promised public servants a raise in pay. They had promised many things that are yet to come to fruition. So it seems to me that in making such a egregious statement, that he wants to distract from their retarded governance in this country. We only have to see where COVID is currently. I mean, just coming on, Dr. Hines, you would note that the Trinidadians have tested somebody leaving our shores with the COVID variants. I mean, I heard Frank Anthony singing weeks, if not months now, that we may have the COVID variant.
You mean the Delta variant?
The Delta or the Alpha variant or any one of the variants operating locally. And it led us to ask the question quite recently whether we aren't doing any testing. One day Trinidad can tell us that a passenger leaving our jurisdiction turns up positive with the Delta variant. So it says to me that there is some retardation in their policy where COVID-19 is concerned, if not with the minister himself. And that is why we had tabled that no confidence motion in the National Assembly that they very slyly, have allowed to go into this recess period. So there's lots of retardation that we can talk about when we talk about the PPP.
And Sharon, let me press you on this. We in Guyana, we have not always been honest in our treatment of race. And because of that, racists, people who have racist feelings, have been able to get away with calling and condemning people of other ethnic groups because they don't go detected, because our people are not necessarily literate about what's the meaning of racism. Like I said, racism is what? Racial and ethnic prejudices plus power force your prejudices. And I want you to speak to the effect that a statement like that by Mr. Jagdeo could have on race relations and political relations in our country.
And you're quite right, because we saw under the last administration that I was happy to serve in a small capacity under, made tremendous strides where this was concerned. We had a whole ministry dedicated to social cohesion and moving this thing that has haunted us from time immemorial, in our country. And one only has to read, for instance, Dr. Eric Williams' Capitalism and Slavery to understand how this whole thing has come about. That it is this whole capitalist system, and Dr. Williams said it in his own eloquent way, that slavery was not a result of racism, but racism a result of slavery. And we can even read some of our own local, some of our own indigenous intellectuals on this very subject matter to see how far we have come, where we were and how far we have come, and how much farther we need to be. So when something like this is said, one wonders what happens to the Ethnic Relations Commission. I mean, they wrote me. I said one of the most innocuous things. I got a letter, and and it's quite bizarre. They said they found I have breached no laws, but they were cautioning me. Right? What happened to Mr. Jagdeo in this instance? I mean, as you said, this can set us back so far, but this was well timed. I don't think this is a gentleman who speaks very loosely. This was well timed to create an effect. They are looking for sympathy. I believe very strongly they are losing their international quote unquote partners, and they want something to happen here on which they can latch on to and say, you see, this is why we need to be in government. This is why, we need to govern. This is why we need to lead. I think, again, Dr. Hines, that this gentleman is really, really trying to be a distraction, and I want to stay focused on deposing them from office.
Yes, and I want to take it a little bit further from where you said it was well timed. There was the anti-racism march in New York that you attended. Mr. Hakeem Jeffries, who is a leading voice in the major power, or one of the major powers in the world, one of the powers that had something to do with the outcome of last year's election, and that when he spoke about racism in Guyana, took it to the state. And then inside of Guyana, in the last month or so, the charge has been made with people coming out onto the street and saying, we are feeling racism in this country. After 1 year of telling the world that they have won the election, it is now coming out, the first party of that documentary that he talked about, that it's now coming out that they actually did not win the election. So Mr. Jagdeo is saying, oh, those who are saying we are not win the election are not sane people. They are retarded. So don't believe them. Again, racism is the ability of others to say that you are not a human being. You don't think properly. Respond to that.
Yeah. Dr. Hines, this is the playbook of the PPP. When all else fails, this is what they hit on. I remember during the campaign, the 2015 campaign, they talked about, oh, if you elect David Granger, the PNC going to come and people in your pot to see what you're cooking. It's rice flour coming back, and a whole bundle of nonsense. We had 5 years, Dr. Hines, where one tear gas wasn't fired, one rubber bullet wasn't fired. And in less than 5 months of their administration, we saw a return to all of those things that they are so noteworthy for, that they are so notorious for. We are seeing before our eyes the gunning down of citizens on the road. We are seeing, they're noted to be a narco state under their administration. We are quickly returning there if we're not already there. Corruption. You only have to look to see, for instance, this latest influx of cash, hopefully to try to prop up the economy under them, and to see what is happening. Listen to their own people talk in Region 6 about the kinds of incompetence that is happening there and the kinds of corruption under that system. One has to wonder, Dr. Hines, when we talk about mental retardation, how was David Granger able to do this so effortlessly? These guys are leading and governing like Trump, and they're making Granger look good, right? And Dr. Hines, currently Granger is not one of the favorites, but they're making Granger look like no drama Obama. Comparatively, economics-wise, in their budget, Dr. Hines, their first and second budget, they outlined all of the growth in all of the sectors under the David Granger administration. And they have come now with 3 finance ministers, Dr. Jagdeo, Kaulasar, Ashley Singh, and still this economy is lagging. It's lagging, and people are feeling the squeeze. Goods in the marketplace has gone up, right? They want to blame the flood and a whole host of other things. We had our own share of issues. Plus, we had to deal with a very, very uncooperative PPP during the last 5 years, and yet we managed to do it. Yet we managed to reform the police force. Look at the police force currently. Can't even tell the difference between milk powder and coke. And there's so many areas, so many sectors where we see this decay and decadence, our loss of prestige on the international stage. We can go on and on and on. So when Mr. Jagdeo wants to talk about mental retardation, look, he's the laughing stock of this world, from being champion of the earth and a green environment and all of that, to now look at his stance on fossil fuels, and he is really, really stumbling to find a balance. He's a hypocrite. He is a hypocrite. And I say again, one only needs to look at their policies if one wants to really and truly analyze retardation and where this country is heading.
And I'm glad you mentioned Granger. You know, I have my quarrels with Mr. Granger, but I would be severely stunned if David Granger would say East Indian people are mentally retarded. I can't even conceive of it. The ease with which a Jagdeo would say something like that means that he's not conscious of the relationship between his power and his prejudices. We suspect that he had prejudices against Black people. We suspect that, but he has now made that clear. Black people, I know you're not a race man, in the sense that it is not one of the places that you start your political analysis or your activism, but Black people have had to endure in the last 20 odd years, certainly in the last year, an assault after assault on their dignity, their ethnic and racial dignity. Those are the people to which you appeal and who look to people like you for leadership. Talk to them as they face another public assault from a public leader. Talk to them.
Yep. Dr. Hines, it is one of the reasons I always say in our program that as political activists, as people who are interested in politics, as citizens, we have to read, we have to learn to internalize information. I remember when Freddie Kissoon, your contemporary, was in his better days, wrote a very, very sterling academic paper on race relations under the PPP. And I would recommend that essay, that paper, to every Guyanese. And you would see systematically how the PPP, on the Jagdeo especially, went about really and truly destabilizing racial relations in this country by basically putting Indian people into every conceivable position of authority, even when you had qualified Black people to fill those positions. And who should have filled lots of those positions, and not only in the public sector, private sector, and also when you look at how land was divided up. How did Irfan Ali got his land there at Lenora? That was a sugar estate that was divested, and they bought up, being insiders in the PPP, bought up huge chunks of that sugar estate. And that essay, they really and truly should be required reading for every Guyanese to understand the playbook of the PPP. And that is why, Dr. Hines, I said that this is nothing new. We have seen this movie before. We understand how they operate. And so, as you would say, we have to confront them. We have to confront them and call them out.
We have to confront them and call that out. And Freddie Kissoon charged Mr. Jagdeo with practicing ideological racism.
That was the name of the essay.
Right. In Black studies, we call it systemic racism, but Freddie called it ideological racism, meaning that it was not racism on the surface, but it was deeply embedded in the thought process.
Yep, in every ministry and every entity, and that is why it's quite interesting to me to see where Freddie is today. It is quite interesting.
Yes, and Mr. Jagdeo took Freddie to court and had that matter in court for a number of years until they reached an agreement. Because Freddie hit Mr. Jagdeo and his government at the core. It's what Dr. Henry Jeffrey called the politics of ethnic domination. And he was in there, and he said this is what has driven the PPPs. Sharon, I know you gotta go do your thing and fight in the ring. Sometimes I encroach on your time.
That's quite okay, sir.
I can't let you go without telling us what was it like Linden yesterday.
Dr. Hines, I might have missed some of that, the very last part of it.
What was it like Linden yesterday?
Oh, Dr. Hines, I think that was an awakening. That was an awakening. And you know, folks there harken back to this whole phrase of the cradle of the revolution. I think something started there in Linden. I had the privilege to be in Georgetown, but something significant, Dr. Hines, is happening in this country. And you as an academic, as a historian and all of that, have a better sense of these things than I do. But when I assess what is happening and how things are shaping up, I get the sense that the PPP has misjudged this moment to our benefit. And it could argue to our benefit if we utilize this moment properly. I think they have misjudged the people. They're still governing in 2015. They haven't realized they're in a different age and a different time. But as I say, it might sound crude. I want them to continue to do what they're doing. They're going to have a very, very short term. And, you know, we want boots on the ground. Facebook is important. It helps us to disseminate the information very, very quickly. It helps us to work smarter, not necessarily harder. But at the end of the day, you know, in politics is about numbers. Politics is about people. We have to have boots on the ground to confront these people in every village, every community. Dr. Hines.
Two things, Sharon, before I let you go. One, the cradle of the revolution is a term coined by Dr. Walter Rodney in 1979. He referred to Linden as the cradle of the working class and the cradle of the revolution of that time. It's an indigenous term coined by our own Walter Rodney. Second, PPP has misjudged this moment. I'm going to hold you to that profound observation and bring you back for us to open it and dissect what
definitely, Doctor.
In that. What do you think? Thanks for giving us a few minutes of your time. You're a busy man. We're all part of this revolution because it's indeed a revolution. Thank you, my brother.
Thanks, Dr. Hines.
And we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back and have two other fighters. The man of economic genocide and the Bostonian Morning Time man. Take a short break, and I'll be back. I'm David Hines, political activist and commentator. If you're looking for informed discussion on Guyanese politics, you must join me every Tuesday and Thursday evening at 6:30 on Politics 101 with Dr. David Hines. On that program, I interview policymakers, politicians, political activists on Guyanese politics in the past and the present. So make sure you tune in to Politics 101 on CAMS TV at 6:30 every Tuesday and Thursday. And on Mondays at 7 o'clock in the evening, 7 p.m., you can join me for Hindsight. On that program, I give my take on politics. And then you can call in and talk to me about the politics in Guyana, the Caribbean, and the rest of the world. That's Monday evenings at 7 o'clock. And so here we go. Monday, 7 o'clock, you can join me. On Tuesday at 6:30, Politics 101. On Thursdays at 6:30, Politics 101. And if you haven't That's enough of me by then. You can catch me on Tuesday mornings on the Buxtonian Morning Time with Kedaki Amsterdam, where we rap about politics also. And that's at 7 o'clock in the morning on Hams TV. All of these programs are on Hams TV. So catch me Monday, on Tuesday, on Thursday, and you get all you want to know about Chinese politics. And welcome back to Politics 101. Big show tonight. We're kicking it tonight, as the young people would say. And we're kicking it because people are trying to kick us. And if people are trying to kick us, we got to kick them back. We got to kick them back. The harder they come, the harder they fall. The harder they come, the harder they fall. That's what my brother Jimmy Cliff says. And we're going to play a clip of Cliff. The harder they come, the harder they fall later on. And so, wherever you are, tell others. Tell Matty Politics 101 is on. Tonight we fight. We're fighting like hell because we are fighters. We were on that plantation and we fight like hell and we defeat plantationhood. They put us in colonialism, we fought and we won that. We're accustomed to fighting and winning. And Jagdeo, if we're mentally retarded, we're going to show him that we are not mentally retarded. We can put him in his place. Welcome to my other two guests, my brothers, Lincoln Lewis, the man from West Bobis, and Kedaki Amsterdam. I don't have to tell you where he's from. Then I thought the young man, he was arrested yesterday. Kedaki tell us what happened yesterday. I know you may have said it a million times, but tell us what happened yesterday. You have to unmute.
Well, as I usually say, I've been calling for more than a year now for boots on the ground. And so when I call for boots on the ground and I encourage people to go out and protest, I usually join them. At least in recent times, I've been doing that. And so long and short, I went out yesterday to join folks on protest. And there were certain sentiments expressed. And I decided, well, there was some amount of sense in them. I proceeded to the Ministry of Education. I think that would be 21 Breakdown, the Minister's Secretariat. And I started a protest outside there. One man. Others joined me eventually. I think 3 or 4 other persons joined me. But the long and short is the oppressors, the agents of the state came and they arrested me and arrested the others and took us down to Breakdown, where we were eventually processed. And we are to return tomorrow morning at 9. The charge is that we assembled unlawfully. Basically, that's what happened yesterday. Of course, I'm explaining what happened without the fact that I was assaulted. I was assaulted by several police ranks because what they considered an arrest, as far as I'm aware, could not have been. Nobody approached me to say, well, I'm a police officer and I'm here to arrest you for XYZ. This is what you're guilty of. This is a breach. all I knew is that there were some flying bodies into mine. And when I realized what was happening, this was a group of people dressed in police clothes. I see the videos rolling, chucked me into the bus, and eventually took me to Brickdam, where we were processed. That's yesterday.
Yes. And of course, we've been saying over and over again that above and beyond everything else, what we are fighting is dictatorship. And dictatorship manifests itself in many ways. It manifests itself in terms of the way they're distributing resources, manifests itself in the mandates against vaccination, the mandates for vaccination. It manifests itself in the high cost of living. It manifests itself in the way they're going about cleansing, ethnic cleansing at GCOM. It manifests itself in the way they're cleansing, ethnic cleansing in the public service. It manifests itself in the way in which the shove is around teachers. It manifests itself in the way which they use the police against citizens, manifests itself in the way in which every day they're calling people names like mentally retarded. And that's why I never tire on this program in saying, don't let them pin us down to one issue, because what we are fighting is dictatorship. Dictatorship. Ultimately, that's how dictators operate. We're going to deal with that in future programs. But for now, let's talk about this statement. You have been talking about race a lot. Were you surprised? Are you surprised that Jagdeo made the statement he made?
No, I'm not surprised that Jagdeo made the statement he made. Jagdeo has always been a racist. Guyanese people got a weakness. Guyanese politicians got a weakness. And more so, Guyanese politicians in the opposition benches now got a weakness. We don't call a spade, or lots of us don't call a spade. We like to be politically correct. Jagdeo has always been a racist. If you look at Jagdeo from the time he was in government previously, you would know that the man was a racist. Christopher Rem, who is of Indian ethnicity like Jagdeo, charged him for creating racial animosity.
Making a racial statement on Babu Jan.
Yes. And that case was going, and it was going and going. I can't even remember what the end result was. But I think some deal was cut somewhere, because eventually I think the case was it petered out. I can't remember exactly. But the fact is that one of your own, in terms of ethnicity, filed a charge against you for making racist statements at Babu Jan, says to me that you are racist. Again, Freddie Kisun is Indian like Jagdeo. And he spoke about Jagdeo being an ideological racist. Good. There are lots of other instances I can quote that will certainly support the belief that Jagdeo is a racist. Remember the young man who, it is alleged, show his middle finger to Jagdeo's entourage, and he was thrown in the lockups, right? But let us look at the economic policies of Jagdeo. When Buxton was reeling from all of the madness that was happening, and Desmond Hyde suggested that part of the contributory factor for the negatives in Buxton was the economic situation, negative economic situation in the village. And therefore, he suggested, he came up with a blueprint, I think assisted by Stanley Ming and others. And he presented it to the Jagdeo government. He said, well, these are suggestions of how you can help Buxton to deal with their economic situation, and so we will be able to alleviate some of these issues. Jagdeo refused it, right? If you look at the maintenance or the budgeting and spending for infrastructural development under the Jagdeo government, you will realize that all black communities were neglected. Even now, if you look at the award of COVID-19 relief and you look at the award of flood relief, you will realize a government where Jagdeo is supposedly the de facto president, the resources are distributed unequally, right? If you look again at the distribution of radio and television spectrum, all of that speaks to how Jagdeo has distributed resources to one set of people disproportionately and marginalize others. So Jagdeo is a racist. I'm not surprised that he would make that statement. As a matter of fact, while they were in opposition, they used the Guyanese critic to make their racist statements. During the elections campaign, they used Facebook trolls to make the racist statements. But now that they're in government, illegitimately so, emboldened by the international community, Sarah Lynch and the others, who in my mind are also racists, he feels that he can make the statement himself because there's nobody who can touch him. At least that is what he thinks. And so he was emboldened to say that those who believe, those who support the coalition and believe that they won the election are retarded, mentally retarded. But I want to say this. I want to say this. Mental retardation is not by choice.
Patience.
It's not by choice. It's part of a health condition, if I can say that. It means you ain't got no control over that if you're mentally retarded. But if you're intellectually lazy, it's a choice you've made. It's a choice. And so I see this mental retardation statement coming from Jagdeo as a revenge. You know, they say you pick up fire rage. A revenge statement in response to what Amanza said about those who support the PPP. Right? About those who support the PPP. But you have to be mentally lazy. You have to be mentally lazy to want to respond in such a manner to an analysis which you're confronted with.
Mental retardation is grounded in the notion of racial inferiority. If you are mentally retarded, if you are said to be mentally retarded, mean you do not have the capacity to reason. A slave did not have the capacity to reason. The whole notion of mental retardation is grounded in the language of slavery. You're onto something. What is used in there is the language of enslavement. Come back to that in the Lewis. Lincoln, a few months ago, another PPP leader, all we come here for the good life. And you pick it up. You pick it out here. Now the next partner say we mentally retarded. I pick it up and bring it out here. You understand why they don't want me and you open out and talk? But rest, because our other leaders are not looking for statements like that. And that's what the PPP get away with. They practice racism. The little boy, I can just talk about it there. Me and you a big man, but the little boy just mentioned it. That one of the weaknesses we have is that we allow the PPP to make racist statements and practice racism, and we don't call them out. That's why when Jagdeo cussing, he always got Lincoln Lewis, David Hines, Eric Phillips. They said they're representing Afro-Guyans. that we understand that interface with racism where the others are not. Are you surprised that the man made that outrageous statement? Are you surprised that nobody else didn't pick it up?
I'm definitely not encouraged with the political response on this issue. I believe that the politicians across the spectrum need to come out against what has been said. This is demonization of a group of people. I said it earlier to somebody last night that Mr. Jagdeo or Barrett Jagdeo need to first and foremost get the mirror, look in it, and you will see where the whole issue of mental retardation exists. David, you spoke just now, you made the reference to when we talk, Eric Phillips, yourself, myself, and others, when we talk in defense and in advancing the cause of the African community, we are being told, we are being deemed by this man to be racist. But let me tell you something. What we need to understand very clearly, that there's nothing wrong in being racial. Because every group, every individual, be it an African, an Indian, a Portuguese, everybody, Amerindian, we gravitate to our own group. We gravitate to our own group. After we work, we line with people who we are comfortable with, who we have had relationship with from the time of birth and so forth. What we don't do, you, nor Eric Phillips or anyone of the African leaders is going out there to say Indians do not deserve to be treated just and fair. Amerindians do not deserve to be treated just. No one of us say that. What we ask for is justice and fair play in society. We ask for the pound of flesh for our people. Let me make it very clear. Listen. Look at what exists. In the pre-independence, the economy of this country premised on two major sectors. Agriculture, which involves Gaisuko, and which involved Bokas, was running the company then, and the bauxite, which was run by Demba and Reynolds. Post-independence, after nationalization, you have had bauxite, and you do have sugar. Every time the bauxite company or bauxite workers fought for something in bauxite. Let me give you one. In 1988, it was the bauxite workers who struck against what they consider as exorbitant income tax. The government of the day sat with and the management sat with the unions, and we agree, the parties agree to exempt income tax from overtime pay every premium hour that our employee may work. If you work Saturday and you work Sunday, you will not pay taxes on those days. You will pay taxes on 40 hours, Monday to Friday. You know what happened? The government gave that to Gaisuko. They didn't strike for it. When the government changed and the PPP government under Jagdeo had an opportunity. They took it away from bauxite, but they keep it in sugar, where they consider those people to be their supporters. What else? These are glaring. This is one of the glaring issues that confront this nation. Today you have a situation where you have the floods. You have category 2 and category 3, the Caribbean disaster. People have described it as region 7 and region 10 has been affected heavily. But where they carry the money where they carrying the money for the relief? They carry it to the strongholds. They carry it to region 5 and region 6 and those places. Let me just give you an example. You know what is coming out? That in some cases, a man may be his wife, his son, his daughter in that house. You know what is coming out? Is that all of them receive a check for what may be considered, what may be listed as rice that has been damaged. 4 people getting compensation for the same thing, right? While in the African communities, they've overlooked many of them. And where you may have a situation where some Africans are, come forward, go there and they were there, they have to come, I don't know, in some cases, they got to bring the land and the rice and carry it in front of them before they can be considered, before they can get something. You're telling me this is economic genocide. This is economic genocide against the African community. And when you talk about it, they get vexed, right? What Mr. Jagdeo is doing, the man has not changed. Look at the man's demeanor. Look at his eyes. It will tell you what manner man we are dealing with. Look when the man raises his hand. Look when the man what? The man looks so demonic that he can do anything to be. The moment you raise up a race, he gets annoyed. He gets on your ass. You must not talk about it. You must not at any point seek to define your reality. When you talk about, David, when you talk about slavery, look at how the guys come out. The academics, they come out writing to trying to equate indentureship to slavery. These are the type of things. What they're doing, they are systematically seeking to denude the African community of anything that it has achieved. I saw one writer said that Fabs Barnum didn't give them or deny them of their hero, the national hero. He talked about coffee. You tell me, is it that Barnum was tasked with that responsibility? A community. Heroes are people who have heroes. They are criteria that determine who will be a national hero. People who have made a significant contribution, right? People like Critchlow, people like Coffee. They have contributed and shaped the destiny of this country. Everything, they're going to throw the old kitchen sink on any leader or any person who look like you and me, who stand up against the train that they're driving. Their train is to rule, not to govern, you know. They have a ruler's mentality. They believe that they must rule a certain group of people, right? And those who, while there are some who will want to help them in the process of ruling, there are some like you and me and others who will not be part and parcel of that. I'm saying also, as you have this man making such a statement, a call on those in the PPP cabinet to either distance themselves from such a statement, or we should, with one voice, hold them as part and parcel of the problem that confronts us. We need to look at it.
Thank you very much, Lincoln Lewis, there. In his perspective on the statement by Mr. Jagdeo, not the first time, not the time, not the third time, not the fourth time, that this man has degraded the African race from a position of authority. And I want to say to us Black people, we've got to overcome this weakness of not recognizing that race is a very important element in terms of how we see ourselves, but in terms of how other people see us. I give a personal story. I went to Howard University, preeminent or one of the preeminent Black universities. Howard was created back in the 19th century to produce, in those days they said, the Black equivalent of the white man. And Howard evolved over time to produce real Black men and women. My mother migrated to the United States in the 1960s, and she always thought that we would go to university. She always would say that she want me to go to Howard University. And when she got there, they lived, this set of Bostonians lived about 2 blocks from Howard University. She would later tell me that she would observe there was something about the students going to Howard University was different, and she couldn't explain it. But I got admitted to Howard University and University of Maryland, and I chose to go to Howard because my mother always wanted me to go to Howard. When I got to Howard, I understood what my mother couldn't explain, because I got a Black education. I got a Black consciousness that was ingrained in my sense of myself and my sense of the world. I already started to get that in Boston and Miami. Now I was in an education institution, was giving us, as I said, a Black education. And so therefore, equipped with that, one then is able at all levels to spot when people are trying to put on Black. And I'm forever thankful for that. And I join with Walter Rodney, who said that the Black intellectual, the Black academic, has a responsibility to Black people to stand in their ranks and to defend them when they're under attack. It doesn't mean that's all you do. Yes, you are women and you must defend women's rights. Yes, you are working people and you must defend the rights of working people. Oh my God, Lewis, about defending the rights of working people. Yes, that we are West Indian people and we must defend our nationality. Yes, we are Guyanese and we must defend and affirm our Guyaneseness. But we are also Black people who have had a unique experience, the experience of enslavement, which gives us a unique view of the world that others don't have. We are not better than other races. Any Black person I hear say that, I call on them. We are not better than other races or ethnicity, but we are not inferior to others. That is why you are not going to hear black men and black women of authority saying that Indian people are mentally retarded. You are not going to hear that. Because we have been the victims of that kind of degrading. And so we leaders, intellectual, academic, political, religious leaders have a responsibility, union leaders. So whenever we hear people assaulting blackness, to come down on it and want us to be so frustrated with our black political leaders, especially ones in political parties, who do not defend us when we are under racial attack. Jagdeo felt that he could get away with what he said. He feels that he could get away because he knows that most of our political leaders would have listened that interview and they would have paid no attention to him saying that black people, supporters of the coalition, are mentally retarded. So I say to you in the audience, defend yourself. And you are people of multiple identities. But as Dr. Walter Rodney once said, if somebody's going to use my race to dehumanize me, I'm going to use my race to humanize myself. You all have a responsibility. You all have a responsibility to defend your racial dignity. When people see a black boy, the hoodie in North America at 1 o'clock in the night, across to the other side of the street, all the police, it's not about his gender. It's not about his nationality. It's not about his social class. It's about his race, the color of his skin, with the meaning that he's a criminal. You all have sons. You all have daughters. Get off this nonsense that you all are Guyanese and not black. You all are African Guyanese. And you bring something to the meaning of Guyaneseness that others don't bring. You bring a history of bondage, but also a history of overcoming bondage. And in the process of overcoming bondage, you bring something unique to human civilization. You bring love. You bring resistance. You answer the question what it is to be human, what it is not to be mentally retarded, not to be thought of as mentally retarded. And we have the burden to prove to the world that we are not mentally retarded. Stokely Carmichael, when they passed the Civil Rights and the Voting Rights Acts of 1964 and 1965, and they asked him, Mr. Carmichael, what do you think this will do for black people? Stokely answered, those laws are not for us. We always knew we were equal human beings. It was white people who didn't know we were equal human beings. So those laws are not passed for us, it was passed for them. We have to be able to correct the world. To correct the world about us and about themselves. And so therefore, if I sound passionate, it's that because some of us have had the opportunity to get an education, to travel the world, to have a global sense of ourselves and the world. And we have a responsibility to defend our people, to defend our race. And I'm never going to tire of that. If an Indian person or the Indian race is under attack, I will defend them as I have done in my political life. But I can only do that if I have a sense of my own dignity, my own purpose, my own identity. I did not ask to be born black. But I'm born black. I was born black. And I live black, and the world sees me as black. And all the burden that comes with that, I have to bear on my shoulder. And I am not going to allow anybody, power or no power, to stick their finger in black people's eyes. I'm going to be in your face. Because black people give me an opportunity. Give me an opportunity to raise my voice. And I'm always going to raise it in the defense of black people. I'm going to defend women. I'm going to defend children. I'm going to defend working people. I'm going to defend the defenseless. But I can only do that if I defend myself. I'm going to take a short break. And when we come back, more with Kedaki Amsterdam and Lincoln Lewis. The harder they come, the harder they fall.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.
Thank you and welcome back to Politics 101. You know, they say that we black people are loud, and we are loud because we always have to raise our voices above, the black national anthem. Lift every voice and sing. We always have to lift our voices to be heard because they've always been putting barricades against us speaking our truth. And we've got to continue to speak our truth. Mr. Operator, cue up a live version of Jimmy Cliff, The Harder They Come. I'm going to come back at you. Kidaki? Kidaki Amsterdam is there. Are you with us? Kidaki,
Yes,
I need you. I'm not asking you a question. I want you to talk about it. Because you come from good stock. You hear your name? You hear your name? That name that you have there came about because of a cultural revolution in Guyana, led by Askria, led by a man that you know well, the UC Guyana, who changed his name from Sydney King to Black Man of Guyana to give you and I and Lincoln and all black people that strength to stand up and push back against those who think that we're imbeciles. Talk to your people.
Well, basically, I want to start by drawing attention to a very early segment of the tape, Dr. Hines, where Jagdeo says you have to test their tolerance, you have to test their patience. A lot of people have not paid attention to that part of the tape, and it jumped out at me this morning. Jagdeo has been testing the tolerance and the patience of black people since he was gifted the presidency in this country. The PPP has been testing the patience and tolerance of black people. And for as much as they have not received the kind of pushback, as a matter of fact, Anil Nandlal went to the US and said that the opposition is no opposition. And they basically are failing, and they would like to see, the PPP would like to see a more staunch opposition to them. The fact that all of this testing of patience and tolerance has been happening, and black people have not been pushing back the way we are expected to push back, the way we should be pushing back, has emboldened Jagdeo to say that we are mentally retarded. The onus is on all of us, this generation, to prove by our own actions, deliberate actions, that we are not mentally retarded. We're not intellectually lazy. We're not docile. But we take seriously our responsibility to defend the freedom which our ancestors gifted us and the freedom which we must protect for our children. Black people have to stop being armchair warriors, Facebook warriors, and put their bodies, put their shoulders to the wheel to support their leaders in the struggle against this racist cabal led by Jagdeo. Every day as a program host, I hear, shut down the country, shut down the country, shut down the country. But when the opportunity is given for Black people to shut down the country, they don't take it. This is one such opportunity. Black people should be shutting down the country for this very statement. They should be shutting it down by keeping their monies in their pockets and refusing to shop at the Indian merchants, especially on Regent Street and in Central Georgetown and all around, because they are contributors to the PPP, quote-unquote, war chest, which emboldens Jagdeo to talk to Black people anyhow. So Black people should be shutting down the country like that. Black people should be shutting down the country by hitting the streets every single day to protest the mandatory vaccination. I know you don't like to hear me talk about it, but the majority Black people, the majority Black nurses and doctors dealt with this pandemic when there were no proper personal protective equipment in this country. They put their bodies on the line to serve the citizens of this country. They put their families at risk to deliver health care. But now they're being disrespectful, being locked out, being disrespected, being locked out of their jobs because they are required to present a vaccination card when those who are employed at the office of the president are faced with no such requirement. This is not hearsay. The evidence is there. And Black people must show that they're not mentally retarded by pushing back against these discriminatory practices, pushing back against Jagdeo and his cabal, when in many of the state agencies where predominantly Black people are employed, they are deliberately paying salaries late every single month. And when people inquire about their salaries and why their salaries are late, they're telling them, is now we make a hand to mouth. For as long as we sit as a people and we don't fight back and we don't bring an end to this impasse, we are empowering Jagdeo to address us in such terms. And since we know that we are not mentally retarded, we ought to take condign action to show that we understand his utterances and we will not stand for it. That's what I want to say to Black people. Right? Stop hollering, you want leader, you want leader, you want leader. Get up, stand up. And you lead your leaders where you want them to go. It's as simple as that. If they can't fall in line, you bring them in line. Otherwise, we're going to continue to have to face this kind of... Jagdeo is not the first one. Chedi Jagan, when he took office in the early 90s, said Black people are at the bottom of the social ladder. And from then to now, as far as I'm concerned, Black people remain at the bottom of the social ladder because they again have not pushed back and they have not fought for what they rightfully are entitled to in this country. And so the impasse can continue. The time is now to challenge it.
The time is now to challenge it, Lincoln Lewis. I want you to talk to Black people. I want you to talk to our people. Talk to them. You've got to put on your audio.
Let me say to you this.
Yes. Yes, you're right. I'm hearing you.
I have serious concerns. I want people of my generation, to work with the younger generation to let them understand what his struggles have been. Yesterday in Linden, I was making the point that in 32 years ago, 1989, when the workers challenged the 10-to-1 budget, the bauxite workers came out with an agreement which said that you ought to have what we call 1% of the sales from calcine bauxite be put aside to purchase food for the bauxite communities. It was a major victory. It's a landmark agreement. No other unions in this country ever had such a situation. The people who are 32 years old, or even 30 years old, the 30 years old, many of them were not born. They were not born, none of them. And those who were 34 years, they were 2 years old. So they don't know what transpired. You have had the struggle of in 2012 in Linden. This 9 years ago. Let's now look at it. What has happened? The people who have seen in the march yesterday and at the rally, some are 18 and 19. They were maybe 9 and 10 at that time. They have not had a first-hand look or experience of what transpired there. And it is for reasons like that that we need to talk with the communities, talk with the people there for them to understand it. I did not, you and me did not understand, did not participate in the 1763 struggles, but we were educated about what happened in 1763. We are in an era where much people don't like to read. They want to listen, and they become more visual. We have to use the technology at our disposal to make sure that people understand what the path we have traveled to get where we are. It is important for them to understand that if our ancestors did not fight the slave masters, then all of us would have been born in slavery. These are issues that are important for people to be aware of. But notwithstanding that, we need to hold hands in this process here. We need to find common ground in the African community to advance the community's cause. We may have differences, but while we have differences, our objectives have to be one, to take everyone out of the rut. Let me say to you, we have to hold our political leaders also accountable. We cannot, as a people, continue to be employees. We have to put in place a system of affirmative action which will bring about new employers, new investors and employers coming from the African community. We can't sit down and believe and people telling us that we're going to give you a job. You know, I always remember a discussion I've had with at the level of CARICOM, and we were discussing Trinidad. Many of the businesses, the business owners in Trinidad had moved from production and become merchants. Rather than producing things in Trinidad, they import from China. So employment, minimize the opportunity for employment becomes more acute. But those same persons who were heading these major companies, their families were living in Miami, Palm Beach, or somewhere. But where they are residing in Trinidad, they had big walls, big fence, and securities with long guns, because they have allowed the society to be degraded to a level where those who do not have will come in for those who have. We don't want that in this country. What we want is an equitable distribution of opportunities, goods, and services. We have to get that. And I call on the African community, let's hold hands. Let us together work to build this community where we can have employers and not only employees. Thank you.
And there you have it, Lincoln Lewis. We're going to take a short break and we're going to listen to some of Jimmy Cliff, the first reggae superstar, the man who had the first full album, the first full reggae album, Wonderful World, Beautiful People. Cliff.
Tell me of fire up in the sky, waiting for me when I die. But between the day you're born and when you die, never seem to hear even your cry. So as sure as the sun will shine, I'm gonna get my share. What's mine? And then the harder they come, the harder they fall. Wanna know? The harder they come, the harder they fall. Wanna know? Well, the oppressors are trying to keep me down, making me feel like a clown. And they think that they have got me on the run. I say forgive them, Lord, they know not what they've done. Cause as sure as the sun will shine, I'm gonna get my share now. What's mine? And then the harder they come, the harder they fall. Wanna know? Harder they come, the harder they fall. Wanna know? Tell them that they don't take no fun. And I'd rather die than live and be a slave. Yes, I'd rather be right in my grave. So as sure as the sun will shine, I'm gonna get my share right now. What's mine? harder they fall. But I know what I say one time. Sometimes I feel one more time. One more time now. All right, that's it.
There you have it, the voice of Jimmy Cliff. And you heard it here in Politics 101. The first reggae superstar was not Bob Marley. It was Jimmy Cliff. Wonderful world, beautiful people. The harder they come, the harder they fall. Lincoln, you remember suffering in the land, Vietnam, and all those songs. That album in 1972 we grew up with, and he said the harder they come, I'm going to get my share now. What's mine? That's what we have to demand in Guyana and from the world. We got to get reparations, not just from the white people. We have to have reparations inside of our country. The harder they come. Our grandfathers back pay, they worked for 200 years on that plantation with no pay. No pay. No pay. You must not be ashamed to say that what? That we have to get our share because other people have been empowered by the blood and the sweat of the African who work for nothing. And we came off that plantation and we get a little bit of money and we buy lands and we turn the wild coast into a place of villages with no money in the bank. We didn't go to the bank for any loan by the sweat and the blood. We dug those canals so that the plantation can survive. I'm saying this not to say that others have not contributed. Others have. But I want to say that we have to beat our drum of contribution because they tell us we have contributed nothing. We are mentally retarded. We are mentally retarded. And so we have to constantly remind them that we came from the shores of Africa against our will. And they brought us here against our will, and we survive. The story of enslavement is not just the brutality of slavery. It is also about the overcoming of slavery. It took discipline. It took mental toughness. It took intellectual capacity to beat the most oppressive system the world has ever known. You come from good stock. And in 2021, do not tolerate no man or woman to tell you that you are mentally retarded. So long as I have breath, so long as I have strength, I will always raise my voice in anticipation of such attack, but more so in the presence of such attack. So my people, my African people, because Guyanese people are also my people. People of other races are also my people. But tonight I'm talking to my African people. You all get wise. Guyana has wealth that will repay us, that can repay us for 200 years of enslavement. And they want to take it away from us. And the place they start is to say, we are not deserving because we are mentally retarded. And if we can push back against that, then we are making a giant stride in reclaiming what is rightfully ours. We want our share of the pie. We want a share of the pie. Tonight, I am riled up. I'm usually riled up. Tonight, I'm more riled up. I'm more riled up because my mother and my auntie and them did not struggle to send me to school to make sure I get an education, for me to dismiss somebody saying that my foreparents are retarded as just an idle statement. They should be ashamed of me if I were to do that. It's not an idle statement. It's a statement that is grounded in 400 years of disrespect, which we ought not to tolerate. Iraqi Amsterdam, your closing thoughts.
We are at a junction in this country where unless black people are prepared to stand up and fight for what they believe in, prepare to stand up and demand what they rightfully deserve, we will soon find ourselves at a place worse than where our ancestors were. We have seen around this world that there are countries, there are societies where a black face is only seen in the slums. Not because blacks are not achievers, but because for the most part, apparently, they remain passive and allow others to dominate them. That might be the type of mental retardation that Jagdeo is talking about. We as Guyanese blacks have a duty, a responsibility to this generation and the next generation and all the future generations to not sit back and allow ourselves to be forced into those slums of this country. Already we are seeing the efforts to remove black people from senior positions, etc., in the public service, and enough is not being done to push back against it. And so I'm repeating that the time is now for black people to stand up and challenge the status quo. Not only to establish that we are not mentally retarded, but to establish the fact that we know our roots, we know that our ancestors contributed tremendously, excessively by their blood, sweat, and tears to tame these lands. And that we have a rightful place here. And we will not allow anybody, regardless of who, to come and rob us of that. This is the time to stand up. Oil resources are involved right now. Natural resources are involved right now. Right now is the time to stand up and be counted. Those are my closing remarks.
Closing remarks?
The time has come for every soldier to participate in this struggle. You know, this government, this PPP, this Jagdeo cabal has been able to throw trinkets to some of the people we consider to be brothers and sisters. And all they can see is that they will receive something. No longer they're looking at what the group can, what the community can benefit from. I believe that's the point that we need to start from. And, you know, I remember well, there was an era when people speak derogatory things about black people,
But then they will turn and say that, well, Thomas, I'm not speaking about you. You're a good black man. What we have here is a similar situation where those who are in the cabinet are being described as irresponsible black people, and the rest are being told that they're irresponsible. Let me say, we are seeing new leaders that are emerging. What I've seen yesterday in Linden, and I believe that we need to give support to those people. We need to help them to come along. We need to give weight to them, because the more leaders, the more persons we get in the arena to carry the message, we can overcome in the near future. And when I say overcome, I'm talking about empowering the community by way of not only a message, but by deeds and by acquiring the requisite resources. I want to urge you, David, and I want to urge the listeners, the viewership, to join with us in carrying this baton. We all together have a responsibility if we're going to make Guyana a better place. We do things in such a way that can rid it of Jagdeoism and make it what it ought to be. Thank you. Thank you, David, for inviting me. Thanks the listeners for being here with us. Thank Kadaki and everyone who participated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lincoln. Thank you, Kidaki Amsterdam. Thanks to Cheryl Brown, was on with us earlier. And a special thanks to you who in the audience who are as fired up. I want to say we are on a mission. We are on a mission to right the wrongs in Guyana, not just the wrongs against those of us who are in the firing line, but the wrongs against all those who are affected. We are on a mission to straighten the crooked lines in our society. We are on a mission to bring equality and equitability to our country. No longer are we going to say, this too shall pass. We will make it pass, and we will make it right. There is a lot that is at stake, and we have got to fight. We've got to fight with all our might. Please continue to tune in to Politics 101. On Monday night, we're going to have a call-in program. You're going to get a chance to give your views. So that's starting this Monday. You've been asking for it. We start this Monday. Help to keep us on air, both on Facebook, but also on broadcast TV. We're on Channel 9, I think, 3 or 4 times a week. And please help us by making those small donations. If you can give a big one, we welcome it. But, we know that you have to share around all the other programs. So help us to stay on air and continue to be vigilant. If you find them chatting nonsense, let us know. Good night. Good night. We come in peace. We live in peace. But do not misunderstand our peacefulness for cowardice. It has never been our birthright, not cowardice. Never, ever. Good night, Kwaheri.
'Cause until the philosophy which hold one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned. Well, everywhere is war. It's a war. And until there's no longer first class nor second class citizens of any nation, until the color of a man's skin is of no more significance to the color of his eyes, I've got to say war. And until the basic human rights are equally guaranteed to all without regard to race, it's a war. 'Cause until that day, the dream of lasting peace, world citizenship, and the rule of international morality, yeah, will remain in but a fleeting illusion to be pursued, but never attained. Well, everywhere is war. It's a war. War in the east, war in the west, war up north, war down south. Yes, this your war, a war. Oh, a rumors of war. Yes, this your war, a war. Oh, a rumors of war. And until the